Hello, and welcome to the Quickstart tutorial for Audio Diaries for Horror FPS Kit. In this video, we'll be covering the initial setup steps, as well as the basic functionality that the system has to offer. To get started, let's open up the Welcome menu. So we'll go Tools, Dizzy Media, Audio Diaries, AD Welcome. Here, we have the Welcome window, which just gives us some basic information, as well as a few action buttons on the bottom to find the documentation or review the asset on the Asset Store. In the Setup tab, we have a brief description on the import gizmo action, as well as the gizmo usage in the actual game scene. So here we're just going to click the Import Gizmos button. It'll give you a prompt. If you want to move the gizmo folder, you click Move, and the gizmos are now moved into the gizmos folder right there. The Localization tab will give you instructions on how to activate and integrate with HFPS Localization Asset Pack. However, we will not be covering that in this video. Now that we have the gizmos imported, let's go ahead and look at the demo scene. So we'll go Audio Diaries, Scenes, AD Demo, and then we'll just go ahead and take a look at one of the Audio Diaries interactions. Diary interactions work similar to any other interaction in the scene. For example, if we click on the phone here, we have a box collider, and if we click on the radio, we also have a box collider. So if we click back on this diary interaction, you can see we have a mesh collider, so when we scroll over it with the mouse, it'll show the interaction. To start off with the options for the diary interaction, we'll cover the general options. First few options that we have is interaction type and use type. The interaction type lets us know if it's going to be a pickup or a stationary object. In this case, we're using stationary, and the use type would be either single or multi-use. A single use allows it only to be used once, so we assign the mesh collider, or the frame in this case, which will disable after the interaction occurs. In this case, we're going to have it be multi-use so that we can interact with it over and over again. Moving on to the input options, we have a few options here. We have first the input type, which allows us to set if the interaction will occur if we press the button or hold the interaction button. If we're going to hold the interaction button, we need to fill out the values here, such as the input name, the display if it's going to be used, and the time and multiplier for the amount of time the hold will occur for. In database options, we have the option to add to the database. If this is true, then it will add this diary entry to the diary menu, which can then be played back later on. In diary options, we will assign the diary that will be used. Here, we are using Allen Missed Payments. These diary templates hold all the data and information for the diary itself. We'll cover that later on. In the message options, we have the Show Quick Message toggle here. If we click yes, then we can insert the message that will be shown when the interaction happens. This is generally used for pickups or single-use stationary objects. Last but not least, we have the audio options, which allows us to set how we're going to play back audio. Since this is going to be a stationary object, we're going to play the audio directly from this source. We're going to choose 3D and then assign a source here. And this source is directly on this object, as you can see here, and it will play in 3D space. Moving on to events, you can see that we have 3 different events showing here: on interact, on diary end, and on locked load. The on interact triggers when the interaction happens, the on diary end triggers when the diary entry stops playing, and on lock load happens when the object is loaded back after a save and load game action occurs. Event actions will update based on the interaction type or use type that you set in the user options section. And as usual with all my scripts, I have an automatic section that allows you to debug the system or the interaction itself during the interaction in real time. In this specific case, I have a diary trigger underneath the stationary diary interaction. This diary trigger will stop the diary entry if the player enters or exits the trigger itself, and it will happen multiple times over and over again. I'll of course cover diary trigger features later on. Let's go ahead and check out a pickup item this time. So here we have a diary interaction that is set up as a pickup. Here we have the interaction type set to pickup, the parent object for the holder assigned, so that is the parent of this object. The input is set to press. We're going to add it to the database. We have the diary assigned for what's going to be played back or assigned. And then we're also going to show a quick message, which will show up in the left-hand corner. Right here we have picked up new diary, hold action to play. And in this case, we're not going to be using a 3D audio, so we're going to do 2D, and we're going to use the interaction sound, assign the sound, and then use a custom volume for that sound. For this interaction right here, we're not going to really be using any sort of event updates or actions. but you can of course assign them and use them here when necessary. For this pickup, we're going to be using an autoplay action, so when we interact with it, it will pick up the object itself, but it will also autoplay the audio. So in this case, we're going to be autoplaying the audio from this barrel over here. So this pickup is assigned just like regular. It's going to be a pickup with a press, add to database, has the diary assigned. We're not going to show the message because it's going to autoplay. And then we're going to set the audio options to 3D audio type and assign the source here. So when the audio starts playing back, it'll play back from the audio source over here. Now let's go ahead and cover the diary trigger. The diary trigger allows you to set various options on playing or stopping diaries when the player enters or exits the trigger area. To start off in the general options, we have the enter, exit, and use type action. Currently, it's set to diary play for the enter action, and the exit action has the none, but we can also set it to diary stop. Here we have the use type, which is a single use or multi-use. The single use only allows it to occur one time after the player has entered or exit the trigger. Of course, if we do multi-use, then it will happen over and over again. In this case, we're going to do single use, and we're going to assign the trigger so that it will disable when the player enters the trigger area. In the trigger options, we can set the tag, or the string name of the tag itself, to detect what object or what player tag will be detected when entered through the trigger area. Below that, we have the audio options, which is just similar to the interaction itself, which is 2D or 3D. 3D will obviously play the 3D in a 3D audio space, and 2D will play it from the 2D audio source. In this case, we're just going to leave it at 2D. And similar to the interaction, we have events here which trigger based on the on-enter or on-exit of the trigger area. Diary templates hold all the diary information that will be used and displayed when you're actually playing back, picking up, or interacting with some sort of diary itself. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll go Alan, missed payments, and in this case it's a stationary, so we're going to just open up these tabs here and we'll see all the options that are available. At the top we have the actual diary name. General options will show the diary type, if it's a general, radio message, or a pickup. General and radio messages and pickups all are separated and displayed differently in the diary menu itself. The play type allows the diary handler to know if it's going to allow the diary to play back automatically or if it requires a manual entry from the player. In this case, we would have the holding of the action button to initiate the diary playback. Below that, we have the player options. Here we can input the speaker's name, the diary entry name, and also a portrait of the speaker or a picture for whatever case you want to use. Below that, we have the audio options, which allows us to set if it's a single clip or a multiple clip, and then assign the clip there. If it is multiple clips, then the multiple clips are assigned in the dialog lines below. In this case, we're going to have a single clip, and then we're going to look at the dialog lines. In the dialog options, we can set the text and the show time for the actual dialogue that is displayed through simple dialogue, if you plan to use that. If you're using multiple clips, you can also assign the clip here for the audio of that line itself. So if you're going to slice up the lines into separate audio clips, you would assign those clips here. Also, if you're going to use multiple clips, then we can also do a skip type, which allows us to set whether we can skip through the lines. So if we have cannot skip, the player cannot skip through the lines. If it is can skip, then the skip button that is assigned on the handler will allow the player to skip through the lines in real time and not have to listen to the entire entry. In this case, we're not going to do cannot skip, single clip, and then we're just going to leave this as it is. Keep in mind that the show time is the time that is used to display the line text through simple dialogue. You can of course update it, change it, and tweak it in real time as you're playing back diary entries to get the exact show time that you need for that line. Now that we've taken a look at a stationary template, let's go ahead and check out the pickup next. Here we have the Booker Not Rats set to pickup, and then the play type is manual. And since it's a pickup, it'll use a location. In this case, we're going to set it to Dark House. and then all the values below are the same as the previous template. A trigger template works exactly the same, except in this case we're going to set the play type to auto. That means that the audio will automatically play back when the trigger is entered. In order to utilize, callback, and save diary templates, we need to store them inside of a Diaries library. So here we have the audio Diaries library, and then at the top we have the location in which those diaries are located. In this case we're going to be using the dark house. And then we have the different types for the different diary entries: general, radio message, and pickup. Below that, we have the diary templates list, which contains the diary entries for that location. Right now, we have the radio messages, which is Alan, so if we assign that there, we can see that it's in fact a radio message. So we go back to the library, and then we look down into the pickup. We've assigned all the pickups here. If we click on this pickup, we can see that it is in fact a pickup. Storing the values here allows the system to be able to call back, save the values, and replay diary entries anywhere at any time. Creating your own diary entries or diary libraries is pretty easy. All you have to do is right-click, Create, Dizy Media, Audio Diaries, Scriptables, and then choose what you want to create, a library or a template. If we click template, it'll create that there, which is a brand new template, and then you can fill in all the values. And you can assign that to the library so that it can be used in the game. Or of course the interaction, such as this, and then we assign the brand new template like so. The major feature for this system is called the Diaries Handler. This handles all playback and display of the actual diary entries themselves, such as the audio assigned for the diary, the portraits, the name, the entry name, and anything else that is attached to the diary itself, such as dialogue text or lines, dialogue audio, things of that nature. In the general options, we see that we have a few things going on here. First, we're going to assign the Diaries library. Here, in the Diaries library, is where all the diary entries are stored for the various types. So in order for the system to use, call back, and save the diary entries, we need to assign them to the Diaries library, and then assign the Diaries library here on the handler. Below that, we have a few options that allow extended functionality, such as pause state. The pause state shows if the playback will be paused with the menu when the menu is displayed. So if you pause the game, the audio diary playback will pause, even if it's being played from a stationary object. In this case, we're going to set it back to none. In menu state, we allow us to set if it's going to be a regular or hide with diary select. So if we open up the diary menu and we select the diary entry to playback, if we have hide with diary select option selected, then it will hide the menu and play back the diary entry by itself. If we have it as regular, then the menu will not hide, the diary entry will play back, and it will require the player to manually exit the menu. The input options cover various things for the actual display and interaction. In this case right here, we're going to have detect pause. Detect pause detects if the pause button is pressed. So if the diary menu is open, when the pause button presses, it will hide the diary menu and reset the menu back to how it was. If you do not have detect pause, then that may not occur. For play input, that would allow us to hold a certain button while the game is playing to play back a recently interacted or recently collected diary entry. The stop input right here allows the player to stop the playback of a 2D diary entry that is playing. This does not affect stationary or 3D playback of diaries. The hold time and hold multiplier are used for the play and stop input. So when you hold down the button, it will use the amount of time that is there and the multiplier applied to that time before the action actually stops or starts the playback. Going into UI options, things get a little bit more complex. Here we have various tabs and sections that show various options and values for those sections. The first section we have here is the menu, and at the top we have a toggle for use menu, off or on. If it's off, then the game will not use the menu, display it, or save any values to the menu in-game. If we have it on, then all values, menu buttons, etc. are all automatically created and ready for the player to interact with. Below that, in menu options, we have 3 different tabs. The first one is options. So we're going to open up main menu and see that we have various references assigned. And at the very bottom, we have a keyboard mouse button assigned. That's the keyboard mouse button that is shown when that menu is displayed. Below that, we have the prefab section, which has a few different prefabs assigned for use with automatic button and menu creation. If you want to customize, change, or alter the way the menu displays, then you need to customize these prefabs in order to update the display, graphics, input, etc. Here in the sections area, we can assign or create what type of menu sections are displayed in the actual diary menu. Pickups will of course use locations and automatic creations, but there will be a parent class for the pickups which is used by the actual diary entries. And just like everything else, we assign the gamepad buttons or the keyboard buttons that will display when going to those menus. Here we're going to have the general menu, the radio messages, and then the pickups all assigned in using the same gamepad buttons. All of the values that are here in auto are automatically assigned and handled. An important factor is to make sure that you set the diary type to the correct diary type for that section. So this section is called General, we're assigning it to General. Below that, same thing, radio messages, radio messages. If they're not assigned correctly, then the values will not auto-create and display correctly. And last but not least, we have the animation tab. The animation itself is currently not in use because a lot of the HFPS menus just turn on and off objects and don't actually use animations. But if you decide to rework some of that, you can of course use the animation option and then use the animator, show, and hide values to be able to show and hide using an animator. Next, we have the player options, which is the diary player, or shows up in the top right hand corner here and shows the portrait, the name, the entry name, and things of that sort. Right here at the top, we have a show player option, which is a toggle, off or on, and similar to the use menu, if it is off, then the player will not display or show when the diary entry is being played back. In this case, we're going to leave it on. Below that, we have player options, which is the actual diary player itself, holder, portrait, speaker, and entry references, so those can all be updated and displayed when the diary player is shown in real time. Next, we have the animation tab, which is just a simple animator and then the show hide strings for that animator itself. And the last tab for UI options is dialogue, which ties into the simple dialogue controller. It has a simple toggle of show dialogue on or off. If off, then no dialogue will be displayed even if called to. We're just going to leave it on so that it displays a dialogue when we call to it. And here at the bottom we have audio options, which allows us to set a source for the 2D playback of the diary entries. In this case, we're going to have it right here on the audio diaries object, and we also have the option to have an intro sound and an outro sound. In this sample, I'm using a tape sound for the intro and outro. Of course, that's not necessary. You can have the intro and outro sounds in your actual audio clips if you decide to do that. But for ease of use, if you want to have them there, then the diary will also include the intro and outro sounds every single time it plays back a diary entry. The Events tab for the Diaries Handler allows us to do all kinds of different events based on what's happening in the handler. In this case, we have on play, on end, on stopped, on pause, on unpause, and then we have more menu options for on menu show and on menu hide. Some of these are pretty obvious, play, end, and stop, but the pause and unpause only occur if the actual general option allows for pause state to happen. Last but not least, we have the audio area, which of course displays all the automatic values, which you can use to debug the system if you're having any issues. One thing to keep in mind when you're setting up your own diary menus or bringing the diary menu over to your own setup, you need to make sure that the tab panel events are all set up and assigned to the correct entry or values. Since you'll be moving, let's say, this object here to a new game UI, you need to make sure that any object that has a tab panel event on it has the correct value assigned to the correct object. In this case, the pause panel is actually assigned to this game UI. Same thing here for the menu controller and the GP select object. Those are all tied into this one game UI. So if you bring this over to another game UI, you need to make sure to reassign those values. Lastly, if you want to add your own Diaries button to your pause menu, then you need to do a similar setup as I have here for the pause buttons. So inside of the game UI, in pause UI, under the actual pause panel, I have a list of pause buttons here, which I created myself for the vertical layout, so it may not look like this, but you can see where the button return is. So here we have the button return, which does a pause check for the pause option if you plan to use that, and then the Diaries button itself, which has links into the game UI and the audio Diaries objects, as well as the pause panel. So another thing to mention, if you are going to bring that over to a new UI, and you need to make sure that these values are assigned correctly. Since Audio Diaries supports visual subtitles, you can include a subtitles option in the options menu. Here, I have it set up already, so you'll need to make sure to copy this over to your own UI if you're bringing it over to a custom UI. Here, we have the toggles button here, down inside the options panel. And here, on the toggle itself, we have a toggle UI change toggle. The last component that we're going to cover today is Simple Dialog. Simple Dialog ties into the Audio Diaries handler and menu when the diary playback occurs. So let's cover some of the general display options. Under the general options, we have a few things here. We have text type and show type. Under text type, we have regular or Text Mesh Pro. If we click Text Mesh Pro, the value will update here to allow us to use Text Mesh Pro to display back the subtitles. If we change it back to regular, it'll go back to a regular text. Under show type, we have regular or hide when paused. If we have it set to hide when paused, then the dialog text itself will hide when the game is paused. If we leave it at regular, then it will not hide itself when the game pauses. And then we have some basic values under display options. As I showed earlier, the dialog text updates based on the text type, and then we have the holder for the text itself. And like usual, we have the auto, which has the automatic values, displays which lines are actually present, the show time attached to them, and any other debug values that you need to look at during real time. And we've come to the end of the video. I hope this video has been enlightening on letting you know how the system works, its features, its functionality, and of course, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, contact me on Discord, or send me an email. And as usual, thanks for watching.